Well, so this afternoon, the Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, is set to address the nation in a few minutes from now as he outlines measures being rolled out to deal with Ghana's economic challenges. We understand that Ghana's leader of the economic management team, who is famed for his sharp criticism of the erstwhile John Mahama administration, is now under pressure to account for how his own government has actually managed the Ghanaian economy. Just a couple of days ago, President Akufo-Addo, in an interview with the BBC, denied claims that the NPP has mismanaged the Ghanaian economy. Listen.
The digital economy, the mobile economy.
Yes, but you're taxing people on money that has already been taxed.
Is the biggest economy in the is emerging as the biggest economy in the country, and for a long period has not had any taxation at all. So it is important now that they also come into the net. Our country has one of the lowest tax to GDP ratios of any country in West Africa and of an equivalent economy. The ECOWAS area, the general average today, tax to GDP average is about 18%. Ghana, we're at 13%. So it's as if you're talking about a country which is already overtaxed, if anything at all, is undertaxed.
Okay, let me take you up on that point. You know, on your low tax ratio to GDP. I'm just going to quote. Read this quote to you. It's from John Kwache, who I'm sure you might know is the Director of Research at the Accra-based Institute for Economic Affairs. He says there are several loopholes in our tax system that, if they are plugged, will be able to raise our tax to GDP ratio to something like 20% from the 12% that you're talking about.
Well, first of all,
are you speaking to experts like him?
First of all, there's a recognition that
no, but he's actually saying, I didn't read all of it. He says that there's no need for the e-levy.
Well, that's his point of view.
He's an expert.
But he's an expert. There are experts in government as well, and we think it's necessary, and that's the reason why we...
You think it's necessary to tax people who are already impoverished?
And they're not already impoverished. We're talking about people. We're talking about taxing an industry and transactions where a lot of value is being created, and we want to also bring that value into government coffers. I think that is something that is there's nothing so, and the e-levy is not Ghana, it's the only country that has something like a mobile, a digital tax. Many countries, they will not like it. People never...
Because they're already taxing people who do business online, and then you are taxing as well.
Very little. People never like taxes. I don't know any group of people, especially businesses, when taxes are brought to them that like it.
Well, so that's the president there justifying the economic conditions, but a number of Ghanaians have actually raised concerns about the economic hardship, including ex-President John Dramani Mahama, who is also taking a swipe at Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, who he claims has gone into hiding.
The Akufo-Addo-led government that came to power on the back of mouth-watering promises to make life easier for Ghanaians and ensure rapid development of our country has so badly mismanaged the economy that we have been plunged into the most debilitating economic crisis in about 4 decades. Indeed, we all recollect some of those mouth-watering promises, including one by the current president to transform this country, Ghana, within 18 months. This crisis into which he has led us has spawned hardship and suffering for our people on a scale never witnessed in the 30-year history of our fourth republic. Daily price increases, fuel price adjustments, and nose-diving currency, which has rather arrested the person who said he would arrest the other restaurant. The dollar has rather arrested him, and so we're looking for him, we can't find him. I asked the NDP if he had a peep so that we could find where Vice President was, and he said he doesn't have it, and he doesn't know his whereabouts. General incompetence, corruption, and waste of scarce resources have combined to make life simply unbearable for the generality of Ghanaians. General incompetence, corruption, and waste of scarce resources have combined to make life simply unbearable for the generality of Ghanaians. No group is perhaps harder hit than the young people of this country. The issues that affect the youth of Ghana who dominate our population are many, and in these times of severe economic downturn, they have inevitably been worse off than perhaps any other demographic group in Ghana.
Well, so that's the big question. Where is the Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia? Fortunately, there's an answer to that. Joining us live now is Parker Wilson, who's live at the event grounds where the Vice President is expected to address the nation and talk about the economic challenges confronting us today. And what's the current condition? We'll be exploring that shortly. But first, Parker is joining us live from the venue where the Vice President is expected to address us. Parker, where are you and what's happening right now? We'll definitely reconnect with Parker. But Parker, if you can hear me, I'm just asking about where exactly you are and when we're expecting the Vice President to speak.
Right, so Blizzard, currently at the Gomwafete where, here's Millennium City, the Pentecostal Church Conference, and this is where the governing NPP is having the National TESCON Conference, and the TESCON is the youth wing of the NPP in our various campuses, being private universities or the traditional universities across the country. And with this conference, the party has decided that they will give the Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, to, according to Nana B, that is the youth organizer of the party who spoke a while ago, that the Vice President is going to make a big announcement. As to what that announcement is, we don't know, but we are yet to appreciate that big announcement. And I've been speaking to some of the NPP members, and they have rejected claims that essentially what the Vice President seeks to do is about what the former President John Mahama said, but rather they had already arranged and programmed that the Vice President was going to speak at this particular event. And basically because of the economic meltdown across the globe, the Vice President will be talking about its impact on the Ghanaian economy, and of course the practical steps, the comprehensive steps the government has adopted to ease the burden on the ordinary Ghanaian. And so that is what he will be talking about. I must say that is a packed room. I mean, the conference is full all across the auditorium. You see members of the NPP, and the national organizer just spoke, and his comments were that the TESCONs or the youth, they are the ones who will be campaigning for the 2024 elections, and so the destiny of the party is in their hands. They shouldn't allow the NDC to dictate for them. They should know that the government has done a lot of good things in the country, and so they should go out there to propagate same. There are quite a number of dignitaries here. We have the First Lady, Madam Rebecca Kufado, the Vice President himself, and of course his spouse, Madam Samiria Bawumia. We also have Gabriel Secretary back home. We have all the national executives of the governing NPP here, right from Freddie Blake to the National Treasurer, so Samuel Oku, John Boydu, they are all present, including some individuals who have expressed desire to lead the party in the upcoming internal election. So many individuals are quite poised, especially those who are here, are poised to listen to or hear what the Vice President will be saying this very afternoon. I'm told that in the next 10 minutes, he will be addressing the members or the delegates who have gathered here this afternoon to listen to him. So we await what the Nanabi says is the big announcement from the Vice President. Currently, the General Secretary of the party is addressing the delegates.
I'm grateful that you are giving us that indication, because clearly it appears that there's something in the pipeline that the Vice President will be announcing to us. So we'll bring that to you as in when we have that. But we know that some other speakers have been commenting on the state of the Ghanaian economy. What are some of these, what are the names, those who have spoken before the Vice President, and what justification are they giving about why we're experiencing the economic hardship? Well, Parker, if you can hear me, I'm just asking about, it appears we've lost Parker there, but we'll definitely be getting the very latest for you, as we understand that the Vice President has a big announcement to make. We're not sure of what that announcement will be, but that big question is also on the table today. What's the current economic condition of Ghana as we speak? In fact, there's a need for us to track the timeline and try and help you understand what's happening. Here's a timeline of our GDP growth rate since 19 1965, and it's going all the way into the current state in which we find ourselves. If you look at the trajectory as we speak, actually, you can clearly tell that we were doing quite well in 2011, right here, during the Mills era in 2011, where we understand that our growth rate was somewhere around 14.047%. That was the level of growth and the highest at the time, one of the fastest growing economies in the world during the Evans Mills regime. But then our growth trajectory began to drop slightly into the next phase of the NDC administration, and then started picking up after the IMF austerity measures in 2017. So there you have it in 2017, right after the highest growth in 2011. Then we experienced that highest growth in 2017. But it was a pickup because the highest was actually right here in 2011, where we recorded the fastest growing economy, in fact, in the world at the time, one of the fastest growing in the world at the time. But in 2017, the numbers began to pick up, and then the Akufo-Addo administration attributed that growth to the number of fiscal measures that were putting in place and some of the measures that the NPP administration was rolling out at the time. In fact, part of the reasons why the NPP won the election, they had promised then that they were going to change the economic fortunes of the country. So at the time in 2017, when everything was smooth, there was no need to complain. But here we are today, and our situation is not good at all. The lowest growth rate since 1975. So we're doing so badly, 0.414%. That's our level of growth. And the president, as you heard earlier, attributed the situation to the COVID-19 pandemic. But many experts say that should not be the only indication. The World Bank is also indicating that the signs were there before the COVID. So we'll be exploring all of that. But let's go back to Parker. Parker would help us understand some of the justifications that we've been hearing. In fact, it's a whole day for you trying to analyze all of this and some more economic matters for you. So Parker, first help us understand what more justifications we've been hearing from some other officials. I understand that Gabi Asare-Otridako's, the former director of the Dankwa Institute, has also been justifying a number of issues. Tell us about that and what more the NPP has to say about the economy.
So essentially, the governing NPP has remained resolute that the economic situation that we are currently faced with, the crisis, the meltdown, is really not about mismanagement, but of course the Ukraine-Russia war and also the inception of the COVID-19 pandemic. They have made the point, in fact, those who spoke, and Gabi a while ago spoke, he's made the point that before COVID-19, the government was actually on a positive trajectory in terms of our economic growth. And so the Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, together with the President, Dr. Akufo-Addo, were steering the affairs of the economy perfectly until we had the COVID. And so largely, anybody who may want to suggest that the current situation is as a result of mismanagement is palpable falsehood. It is never true. It is quite misleading. And so that you should go out there and defend the party and let them know that the NPP administration has done a lot of work in terms of the economy, but for COVID and but for the Russian-Ukraine war. So these has been the two key issues that has been attributed to the current crisis we are facing. And they have made the point that in spite of the challenges, the president and the vice president are still confident that they will turn things around. And that is why some few weeks ago or days ago, we had the finance minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, announcing to us a raft of measures being taken by the government to ensure that they ease the economic burden on the ordinary Kenyan. And so they are quite confident that going forward in the next 2.5 years ahead of us, the party is quite positive and poised that they will turn things around. And for breaking the 8, they essentially will break the 8. In fact, it's been an agenda here, and most of the speakers who spoke earlier before the General Secretary, who is now addressing them, has made the point that it is possible to break the 8, and it will only be possible when the youth, of course, the Tesconites go out there to propagate the good work of the party and, of course, the government as well. So they are confident that going forward, the next 2.5 years, they will do everything possible to win the 2024 election. One of the things that Gabi said was that if the former President Mahama is allowed to assume power in 2024, what it means is that all the economic gains achieved by the NPP administration will be reversed. And so they have to make sure that the party wins the 2024 election, and they will win if they go out there to advocate for the party and also to let Ghanaians know what the party has been doing since they won power in 2016.
And let's touch on the big announcement that we're hearing of. Do we know what it's all about? Are you able to pick some information on the grounds as to what this big announcement could be?
Well, Blizzard, I tried to speak to Nana B to have a better appreciation what this big announcement is. Well, he tells me everything is in the hands of Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia. He doesn't want to take the wind out of his sail, and so we should wait patiently for him to address Ghanaians, and of course those who are here, and he will make that big announcement. As to what it is, we do not know. So we are waiting patiently for the turn of the Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, to address the delegates, and when he's done, we'll be able to establish what the big announcement is. So. The people who are here, they themselves, they don't know what the big announcement is. So we are all waiting for the Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, because the NPP has kept under wraps the National Youth Organizer, Nana B, who is actually the main architect, the main engineer of this particular event, doesn't want to disclose the information to us. So we wait patiently for the Vice President to take his stand, and we will hear what the big announcement is.
And Parker, one of the topical issues, in fact, you've been monitoring Parliament as well. One of the topical issues has got to do with the controversy surrounding the e-levy. Are we getting any comments on that as well?
Well, so far the speakers have not touched on that, but it is a petition of many, because a few conversations I had with some of those who are here were also inquiring for a better appreciation of how the e-levy will be implemented. So it is the petition that if the Vice President is speaking, obviously he should touch on the e-levy and provide clarity on how the policy or the act will be implemented come next month. So far, nobody, not any of the speakers haven't touched on that. They have touched on Agenda 111, they've touched on NAPCO, they've touched on the 100 million jobs, the 1 million job the President of the government is expected to create. But for e-levy, we haven't heard anything about it. So it is the expectation of many that the Vice President speaks, he would provide some clarity on how the policy will be implemented, the deductions and everything, all the ambiguity around it. Perhaps it might bring some closure to it and some clarity to the whole initiative.
Parker Wilson joining us live there from where we're expecting the Millennium City, where we're expecting the Vice President to address us. In fact, as Parker was indicating, in a few minutes from now, the Vice President will break his silence, will tell us what government is doing to contain the imminent collapse of the Ghanaian economy. But fortunately, there's one man who was at the center of it all when the NDC administration was experiencing quite a good record in terms of the management of the economy. Fifi Fiavikwete is a former Deputy Finance Minister under the Mills administration, is joining us now via Zoom. In fact, he'll be helping us with this discussion. We're understanding that the Vice President will take his stand shortly. But first of all, Fifi Fiavikwete, let me welcome you to the polls.
And I'm happy to be with you, and a good afternoon to all your many viewers.
Indeed, it's such a pleasure watching you again, particularly when you've gone a little under the radar. Is it the case that you are pleased with what's happening across the country and the governance that we've seen from the new Patriotic Party administration?
I think it's more about watching quietly in order to see exactly what the so-called magicians who proclaimed that they were messiahs going to transform this country into a paradise are able to achieve. We saw 4 years, and those 4 years absolutely were not good enough. They boosted for 4 more, and the 4 more actually is getting even worse. So basically, I think I'm rather stunned into silence, shocked about the level of incompetence and the shocking display of hypocrisy that this country has been engulfed into.
And I guess the reason why you're making all of this argument is because of what's happening now. And if we could just illustrate that to you, you have it right here, 0.414%. That's the rate of our growth right now, the slowest and the lowest since 1975. But you're making this argument, and the president responds by saying it's all because of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's justifiable, isn't it?
The sad part is not the fact that the economy goes through difficulties. Every economy now and again goes through some difficulty. The sad part is that when you have in the leadership of a country, let's just say the group that simply is not candid enough to accept what the truth is. You saw, for example, that when we had difficulties between the period, let's say 2013, 2014, President Mahama was very honest about the difficulties. He didn't seek to shift the blame. When, for example, we had to confront the energy crisis, we did not shift the blame, even though that crisis was not our making. But we did not shift it. We met it and try hard and fix it. But we are dealing with a group that is pretending as if Ghana is an island. I mean, Ghana is surrounded by so many countries, and all those countries never experienced the levels of what you call the collapse that Ghana saw as a result of, in the year 2020. I mean, growth in Cote d'Ivoire, growth in Togo, growth in Benin, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, never was at the level that our growth was. Now, so to simply use COVID as an excuse, simply showing that you are not showing even the level of honesty, the level of conduct that is needed. And that is the number one trait that is needed for a leader.
But Fifi, many would challenge you on that claim, particularly when the argument is that and when I say you, the NDC did not take off on a clean slate. You had a pretty bad record when you were exiting office, and the new Patriotic Party at least made some significant gains, and now we are recording a slump in the economy. So it's not as though it was a clean slate when the president took off.
But that itself is another big lie, because if you will recall, in 2016, the cedi depreciated by less than 9%. Okay, we are talking about a group that today, with all the massive oil revenues that they are getting, still have the cedi depreciating at 15%. In 2016, it is true that GDP was not very high, but every single person who was following the Ghanaian economy knew that work had already been done that was going to ensure that GDP was going to grow at a minimum of 8% in 2017, which was known not just in Ghana, but actually it was known all over the world. The World Bank, IMF, the investors, the credit rating agencies, all of them knew that Ghana's economy, work had been done to ensure that growth was going to be a minimum of 8% in 2017. Massive talk of investment, it was handed over to the government that was in place. So you should not just limit it to what GDP was in 2016. You should be looking at the amount of work that was done to ensure that the growth in 2017 was going to rebound and reach a very high level. But of course, there again, I talk about the lack of conduct and the lack of honesty, because ordinarily, any group that came into office in 2017 should have actually been, humble enough to accept that the real work that was bringing about that growth in 2017 had already been done by President Mahama and the team that worked between 2013 to 2016. So to come and say that, we came and saw a growth of 8%, the truth of the matter, you had nothing to do with that growth. I'm talking about MPP. That job had already been done. The stock of investment that led to that growth had already been done. So if you say that there were difficulties, of course, every economy goes through difficulty. But what do you do in the midst of that difficulty to ensure that there's a massive rebound, to ensure that whoever is taking over from you is having an economy that is strong enough to accelerate? That is where the difference lies. And that's exactly what we did. Yeah. Not only did we resolve the energy crisis, which actually had been very difficult for any previous government to do, we also achieved all this in 2016 without one peso coming from the Bank of Ghana. Zero Bank of Ghana financing. Our friends in 2020 had access to not less than 20 billion cedis. We had zero, not one pesewa in the whole of 2016. But still in that 2016, we were still able to prepare the ground for the rapid growth that we saw in 2017.
And I'm not exactly quoting the president, but he says everyone is suffering, and this is not a situation that is peculiar to Ghana. All across the country, even in the United Kingdom at the time when he was granting the interview, was experiencing some level of economic difficulty. So it appears that the COVID-19 is a force majeure, isn't it?
Now, typically, the president is doing exactly what he does, running away from responsibility, taking cover under a pandemic when the problem actually was caused by.
But you do agree that the pandemic was part of the problem. You have to admit that.
But you must appreciate that every economy will have to handle external difficulties as well as internal difficulties. There were massive external difficulties leading to 2016. For example, if I mention to you about what happened in 2015 as a result of what you call a collapse in prices of cocoa and stuff, we have to make do with that. But you don't use that as an excuse. It's only an irresponsible people who try to run away from their own problem and try and blame another problem for it. The problem we had in 2020 has a lot to do with the recklessness of the government. Because remember, as I mentioned earlier, the deficit of almost 16% that we had in 2020 had nothing to do with the pandemic. Côte d'Ivoire did not have that kind of deficit. Nigeria did not have it. Rwanda did not have it. Togo did not have it. So if anybody tells you that the deficit that was brought about in 2020 was because of the pandemic, the person clearly is not telling you the truth. The person is running away from responsibility.
But the signs in 2017, Fifi, by the signs in 2017, 2018, and 2019, even the president talks about 2020. Before the COVID-19, the signs, the indications we're getting was that GDP growth rate was quite significant.
As I told you, the highest growth rate that they have experienced was in 2017, and that came about because of the massive work that the NDC had done and handed over to them. As I mentioned to you, that growth rate was already predicted even before the end of 2016.
What's the scientific basis of that?
What do you say?
Is there any report? What's the scientific basis for us to believe what you're telling us?
I'm sure even Joy FM, I'm sure you even covered it. The IMF, the World Bank, all of them had predicted Ghana's growth was going to be not less than 8% in 2017. And these predictions were done even before the end of 2016. So for them to even come and not acknowledge that, tells you again that these are people who they simply don't want to tell the truth. President Mahama announced that by 2017, growth was not going to be less than 8%. We knew about that already. 2 massive oil fields had already been handed over to this country before they came into office, and that was largely the result of the growth that they saw in 2017. Subsequent to 2017, growth started coming down. Now, if they say there were no problem ahead of the pandemic, it's not true. 2018, deficit had already gone up to 7.5%, which was higher than the 2016 deficit. In 2016, deficit was about 6%. By 2018, they are taking the deficit to 7.5%. 2019, the deficit was still about 7%. So you can see that they already were losing it. You know, depreciation of the currency, as I told you, by 2018, the depreciation of the currency had gone ahead of what they saw in 2016. By 2019, the same. So you were talking about a group that already were losing it completely. So for them to use the pandemic as an excuse, it's again another show of irresponsibility.
We know that this is of concern to the National Democratic Congress. In fact, the former president, John Dramani Mahama, has been talking about the situation. He goes ahead to take a swipe at the vice president, indicating that he's not been able to manage the economy well and that he's been hiding ever since. Are you happy that the vice president is finally showing face, quote unquote, right now?
To be happy, I really don't know about whether I should be happy or I should be sad. All I just know is I'm curious exactly to know what exactly it's coming to say. I mean, this was the individual who was proclaimed to be the Messiah, the individual who said that Ghana was borrowing too much and they had the answers. There was no need to borrow. Today, our debt to GDP has gone over 80%. This was the individual who said he was going to bring about what you call economic measures that would ensure that we move from taxation to production. I mean, today, we absolutely are not just taxing our people, but we've gone even to the extent of taxing even Momo. I mean, through an e-levy.
Right.
This is an individual who made all kinds of pronouncements on the transformation of the economy. The economy today clearly shows that there's no transformation.
But since you're talking, and since you're talking about it, why don't we go into it? It's part of the solutions that government is proposing as a means of checking and raising revenue, first of all, and checking our dependency on aid, foreign assistance, and all of that. Now the president says, if you look at our figures and across the sub-region, West Africa, Ghana has a lesser tax regime, and that there's a need for us to show it up. At least we're doing below the average across West Africa. So what's your response to that, particularly when we know quite well that the figures are clear, only a small amount of persons are paying taxes in this country, and that there's a need for us to raise more revenue?
What was their tax to GDP ratio at the time they were criticizing the previous government? It was exactly low as well. But they said that there was no need for more taxation. That actually the quickest way to do is to move the economy from taxation into production. And then you are able to, as it were, generate the cash flow that will be able to, as it were, help the economy. So what happened to all that miraculous prescription? That is an admission that totally they've lost the plot. So if you lose the plot, it's okay. But at least be humble enough to admit that you lost the plot. Be humble enough, either hum or pie, and stop trying to create the impression that really know you've known, but actually said that other issues that have brought the problem, when you know that it is your irresponsibility that has brought it about. Now, if you have a situation where you come and then you borrow as heavily as they are borrowed, and throughout that period, the amount of that borrowing that you are applying to capital expenditure, which is the means by which you actually grow the economy, which actually ensure that you are able to get what you call enough money to be able to develop the country and so on. If you actually are underperforming in terms of how much money out of that borrowing you are applying to infrastructure, to proper development expenditure, you are going to have a situation where contribution to taxation are naturally going to suffer, because that's the way you bring it about. Now, our time, you're talking about capital expenditure as a percentage of revenue. That was far, far higher than what it is they are seeing. So naturally, you have a situation where a lot more, should I call it, activity taking place in the economy, and therefore contribution to tax is going to be up. Now you come and you literally, depress that particular fundamental, which is so important to growing the economy, which is fundamental to making sure that we create the necessary job. And then you are now resorting to what you call taxing people's what you call savings, money that they have saved. So effectively, it's like money that I have saved after I've paid my tax. Money which is supposed to be in my wallet, I decide that I want to put in an electronic wallet in order to do transaction. That as well, you have to go for it. It tells you that you totally have lost the plot.
But the fear is the alternative is scary. Once we don't go for internal mechanisms, we may have to rely on foreign assistance. I hope you're not against government's aim of building Ghana beyond aid.
No, but I'm saying that if you want to truly build a Ghana beyond aid, then you must actually have shown over the period that you've been in office. You've borrowed far more than any government in the history of Ghana. Within the period of 5.5 years, 6 years, you are talking about a resource envelope of far more than 530 billion that has actually come into your hands. And what do you really have to show for it? You cannot, for example, show the stock of infrastructure that a government that had virtually about half of that resource can show. And now you are talking about what? You are going to be forced to depend on foreign loan, but you actually have done that heavily already. So what is new? Now, if you've had access to 530 billion and still you cannot change the situation, what is the guarantee that if you have access to 6 billion, which even there's no likelihood you are going to get, what's the guarantee that that's going to change your situation and make you depend less on foreign loans? We are talking
austerity. You agree? Fifi will come at a cost. There would be certainly a challenge to a number of initiatives that government is rolling out. So for instance, the free senior high school policy. These are critical to the development of the country. You agree?
Yeah, but then if you even take note of all the so-called, shall I call it, flagship projects that they basically have been trumpeting all over the place. The total resource that have been committed to all these flagship projects over this last nearly 6 years is not more than 42 billion. If you have over 530 billion available to you, and the flagship projects all represent maximum of 42 billion, then really that's like a drop in an ocean. You can't use that as an excuse. You have had access to far more resources to be able to do so much more for the people. Now, so you can't really tell us that, listen, we're talking about a group as I mentioned. I mean, during the COVID, taking advantage of COVID, they had access to over about 40 billion cities. 40 billion cities. I mean, do you know what that means? That's massive. We're talking about a period of, throughout the period of Prof. Mills, okay? I don't think that we had access to that much money. And you have access to that in 1 year. 1 year. 1 year. And you still don't have anything to show. We are now learning that even some of the money, for example, that they took from stabilization fund.
You should be prepared to project your party.
We need to indicate to you that we're still having a conversation with Fifi Fiavikwete. He's the former Deputy Finance Minister. He's on with us. In fact, Fifi Fiavikwete, thank you for staying with us. In fact, we'll be crossing very shortly to listen to bits of what the Vice President has been saying. Then we'll pick up your thoughts on it briefly and then have your response on that. But you were making a point about how much revenue government has made and why they're not able to make full use of the funds.
Yeah, I was just talking about, for example, in 2020, they got access to about 40 billion in just 1 year. 1 year. In fact, I wouldn't say 1 year, just about like 4 months. And they still left us with a massive deficit of almost 16%. Now, we are just learning, for example, that part of the money they took from the stabilization fund, which were supposed to make available to the energy sector, that money, we are in 2022, that money has still not been given to the energy sector. So the question then is, what exactly have they done with all these monies? And for you to now be talking about you need 6 billion desperately in order to be able to bring some salvation to Ghana. You had access to huge funds within a period of 4 months, and you still left us with massive deficit. That had brought about inflation that today is about 16%. 16% inflation. Your currency is depreciating at a fast rate. You're now using artificial means to see whether you can somehow hold the depreciation of that currency. Now, so really your problem is not that monies have not been made available to you. Your problem is that you've been absolutely reckless, you've lacked ideas, and you have shown clearly that you are not on top of the job.
So for you, going forward, how do we fix the problem? And I guess that's the major concern of a lot of people out there. The cost of living is rising and a number of Ghanaians out there are looking for the solution. What exactly is that solution for you?
I say all the time that the beginning of all things is first and foremost to stop the line. Stop the blame shifting. Stop trying to blame somebody for your problem. Because if you do that, then you will not be able to confront the real situation that is causing you.
You feel, I'm sorry for cutting through. I'm sorry for cutting through, but you feel that the government has not been honest enough. You're calling.
Absolutely.
You feel the president has been lying to us.
For example, how on earth are you going to blame Ukraine for the depreciation of the currency? Why are you blaming Ukraine for even the fuel prices? These are things that have come about because of your own mismanagement. That absolutely caused the depreciation of the currency to, the cedi was depreciated even before Ukraine started war 24th of February. Before 24th of February, the cedi was already, depreciated in the region of almost 13%. So how are you going to blame Ukraine for that? How are you blaming COVID for that? It's because of your own recklessness. Now, so if you do not address that, then of course you are definitely not going to be able to find solutions. Because as I told you, the reason why President Mahama was able to, for example, fix Doomsday was because we were men enough to accept the problem, even though that was not caused by us. But we did not run away from that responsibility. Having done that, then you are able to see exactly the nature of the problem, and then you can start applying the remedy that needs to be applied. But when you are all desperate, you think that running an economy is all about spin, trying to deceive people, hoping that somehow you can throw dust in their eyes and in order to deceive them through manipulation of figures. You only are digging your own hole because you're virtually acting like what you call the ostrich, burying your head in the sand and singing tunes and dancing yourself and thinking somehow you have resolved the problem. So the first and most important thing is to stop running away from the responsibility.
that you have taken us into this ditch. That is number one. Two, that's the only way you are going to start getting credit. Because the investors out there can see that this is a group that clearly is not being consistent. This is the group that says A and does the very opposite. This is a group that made noises about fiscal discipline. They took advantage of election 2020 and COVID and pushed what you call deficit to beyond 16%. Of course, the investors out there know that you cannot be trusted. This is a group that doesn't want to accept the fact that the problem of Ghana did not come about because of external circumstances, but because of their own mismanagement. So if you continue to do that, the investors out there know that you have no credibility. And if you don't have credibility, people clearly are not going to be interested in investing into your economy. Because clearly they cannot even trust the numbers that you are giving out to them.
All right, then.
Because don't forget, we are talking about a group, for example, that for many years went systematically trying to even deceive this country about what you call the deficit. So they go and produce one deficit to the IMF, and then when they come to Parliament, they produce another deficit. And then when you catch them, they say, oh, it's because of a banking sector issue. That is why we have to have two separate figures. But that's not the first time we're having banking sector issues. When we took over in 2009, there were several issues that were affecting the banking sector. We had to, for example, look for huge money to pay Ghana Commercial Bank because it was virtually on the brink of collapse. Those were efforts that were made to restore confidence in the banking sector. We had to, for example, solve the energy sector legacy debt, which actually has been debt that had been an albatross on the neck of this economy for several years. We had to resolve all that, and all those affected deficit.
Right.
But did you hear any of us, did you hear GM and the government talking about different kind of deficit, one to the country and then one to IMF? No. That is what honesty brings about. And then with that, you're able to find solutions.
Okay, then. We need to go, but then obviously we know that all of this boils down to political will and the ability to deal with the challenges. Obviously, you're comparing records to an erstwhile regime, which is the political alternative, the National Democratic Congress. Given the track record that we have, are you able to put your best bet on the NDC going forward into the 2024 elections?
I mean, there's no comparison whatsoever. What we have is basically a group that believes that managing an economy is all about blowing trumpets, using slogans, and throwing about words and proclaiming magical solutions when the very reality is the very opposite. Ours was a group that absolutely was not making a lot of noise, but was delivering. Compare the records. Compare the record. I hear some of them talking about that they have had better fundamentals than we've had. That's not true. We're talking about in 2016, even in the midst of that difficulty, not only did we resolve the massive energy crisis, we brought interest rate down from as high as 26% to 16%. Today, with how many years they have been in power? I mean, what have they done, for example, about treasury bill rate? Even in their best moment, treasury bill rate never went below 13%. And we have brought treasury bill rate down to 15% in 2016 before leaving power. Now, so what fundamentals really are they boasting about? I mentioned about, for example, growth. That even the growth they are boasting about in 2017 was actually growth that was handed over to them. Gross reserves, we left to them about $6.2 billion of gross reserves. We left for them a balance of payment surplus. We left for them infrastructure investment fund. We left for them even what you call the Exim Bank that they're actually using today and doing all kinds of politics and shouting about doing stimulus to a number of companies, some of them that have been here since Kwame Nkrumah days, that suddenly have become companies that they have constructed over the period that MPP has been in power. I mean, even the money that's coming, that bank that the money is coming from was actually a bank that was set up by the NDC. Now, so effectively, you match us, and I've not even talked about the massive infrastructure. We're talking about taking expansion of electricity from 52% to about 83% over the period that we're in power, taking water from 57% to about almost 80%. I mean, those are massive infrastructure, massive jobs that are done to be able to bring about an alleviation and an uplift in the conditions of our people. So really the difference is that Ghanaians, I think, have gotten over the last 5-6 years to know that whereas these people are loud barrels, empty barrels, that make a lot of noise, NDC are people who really do so much more without making too much noise.
Would have to leave it here. Fifi Fiavikwete, former Deputy Finance Minister, I'm grateful for your time. This is The Pulse. When we return, we'll bring you some more stories. Stay with us.